What's up, my cocks? So, you want to learn how to play Era, the Kai simping, speed blitzing, 2000 IQ trapping, hot topic looking ass, big titty goth witch who teaches us all that size does, in fact, matter. Well, allow me to continue pretending I have any idea what I'm talking about with another guide.
Thanks, I guess.
Even though I'm god-awful at the game and just hide my incompetency through sick clip montages of only the best plays I did accidentally on purpose. Let's hop right into it with her playstyles. Era is one of the more flexible strikers in the game. She's able to fill a variety of functions and positions, depending on team compositions, matchups, awakenings, and individual skill expression. Era is a rather unique striker. At the time of making this guide, she is the only dedicated supportive pick in the game. Atlas doesn't count, because when have you ever seen an Atlas player use their special ability when you need them to?
Help me! Help me!
Additionally, she is one of the few strikers with debuffs, and is the undisputed queen of kneecapping opponents. The out-of-the-box playstyle is that of pure support, where you spend your time enabling allies and, mentally, disabling enemies. This lends itself nicely to a midfielder playstyle, where you can make the most of her buffs and debuffs, while setting up passes to your teammates.
You do your thing, team.
However, don't let this box you into playing her a certain way. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you can play Era as a hyper-aggressive forward, utilizing her speed and setups to blitz the enemy defense. Depending on your personal playstyle, you can fall anywhere along this scale. I personally like to play her as a hybrid midfielder that moves forward on offense when required, so most of this guide will be from the perspective of my playstyle. As a side note, Era goalie doesn't work because her abilities can't be used reactively. Stop coping.
Don't. Just don't.
Onto the ability overview. Don't worry, I won't just be reading what it does off the in-game playbook like most other guides out there. I'm sure you guys are at the very least literate. Instead, I'll also talk a bit about specific quirks or use cases for each ability. Era's primary is Bewitching Beam, perhaps the single most overloaded ability in the entire game. It does it all. It's a beam of control that fills several roles and makes your friends swell while it steals enemy souls, and while it takes toll, you score a free goal. The only things holding it back are the weak knockback, relatively short range, and, much like the one guy in your friend group, takes forever to come out. If you don't know who I'm talking about, trust me, you are that guy, pal. Congratulations, King! Since the knockback on the core is not very strong, most of the value comes from the debuffs it applies to enemies. Slowing enemies to a crawl and giving them T-Rex arms effectively takes them out of the game for a few seconds. This decrease in power is pretty good at saving your team from brawlers. Otherwise, targeting your own brawlers helps them with their KOs. Try to hit as many targets as possible with each cast to get the most value out of the ability. The beam is not ideal for ball control, but just like your mother, it'll do the job. The best use case is when you can hit the core along with an enemy or two. The debuffs applied to them will make returning the core difficult when they've contracted tiny hands disease. Be warned though, since the ability has a fairly long cast time, it is often not possible to use it reactively and must be used predictively. When striking, you will need to set up your shots to give enough time for the ability to cast. A self-pass to the wall should suffice. Otherwise, you'll need to accurately read your opponent's strikes well in advance. It can be difficult, but most people won't expect Eras to just use their primary for pure core control, so it can be pretty effective at catching people off guard. Your secondary is Flutterfly. We all know how annoying Kai and Octavia can get with their light speed behavior. Now imagine having to deal with an entire team of speeding drunkards with no risk of DUI violation. This ability provides one of the biggest instant speed boosts in the game, second only to drek'ar while invisible. And it applies to all allies in a large area. One quirk to note about this boost is that, unlike every other speed boost in the game, it is decaying. So even though it gives an initial speed boost of 40%, it won't be like that for the entire duration. Because of this, it won't let you be everywhere all at once, unlike certain other ball-chasing bozos. But it is effective for short bursts of pressure that can catch the enemy unaware. Remember, you can use the ability for your allies when you see the opportunity to help them contest the core, even if you don't necessarily need it for yourself in that moment.
Okay, I'll help you out.
Though, to be honest, the boost is so good that you could just use it selfishly if needed. This is the cornerstone of Era's Blitz playstyle. Although short, The speed boost is so potent that it functions almost like a short-range dash to reposition instantly, follow up on hits, and beat everybody else to the core.
Oh wow, here he comes.
What dude would have got
Gold. Yeah.
This ability is part of why I prefer to play her as a midfielder, giving her the best opportunity to buff as many allies as I can with a single cast. An effective play pattern you can utilize is to position midfield and pass the core to your forward. Then, immediately use your boost to reposition aggressively, covering any openings left by your teammates. The speed boost on yourself and your forward helps create incredible pressure in front of the enemy goal. You can also get away with quickly repositioning between mid and forward whenever needed. Lastly, Era's special is Magic Maelstrom. Cue the montage of Gigabrain 2000 IQ predictions that I totally did on purpose to trick you into thinking I'm a good player. A lot of new players tend to overvalue the KO potential of the Maelstrom, but this is by far the single most telegraphed ability in the entire game. The only time you can actually kill anyone with it is if you happen to catch them completely off guard. This is assuming you even manage to get a full charge to deal any knockback without alerting all of China. Especially with the introduction of the energy meter, high-level players will either completely dodge it or evade it. So, Maelstrom is completely worthless now? No, you idiot, use some critical thinking for once. God, do I have to spell everything out for you? Just like how I mentioned earlier with the primary, Era is a prediction and setup reliant striker. Instead of using the ability to react to a play, you want to play reactively to the ability. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is you can set up your Maelstrom in advance and then formulate your strategy around it.
I've got it under control.
One basic play you can do with this is to pass the core along the same trajectory as your Maelstrom. If the core is in front, it will surf the Maelstrom all the way into the goal. If it follows behind, the Maelstrom will clear the path for the core. If the enemy is too focused on getting the core, they may just end up falling victim to a free KO or be forced to dodge and miss the save. Either way, this ability throws an additional load of bullshit for the enemy to worry about. Once the Maelstrom is in motion, make sure you are positioning to cover where the Maelstrom isn't. This is how you get those giga-brain traps that cut off all pass routes all by yourself.
Checkmate.
Almost like having a teammate that's actually good. One last important point for all new players is to remember that you can prematurely release your Maelstrom if the timing is suitable. Resist the urge, Sam. You don't need to make the joke. Premature While the Maelstrom won't be able to KO as effectively and will only be a half-chop NATO, it still holds great value as a core control tool, as the core can't phase through it like other strikers can. There is no point in charging your attack for 5 episodes just for it to miss, or even worse, for it to block your own shots.
Oh, I hope nobody saw that.
As of the changes to the Awakening system, there will be a rotating pool of Awakenings in each patch, so I'll try to talk about them in a more general sense to future-proof this guide. As I mentioned before, Era can be built in a multitude of ways that influence what Awakenings you'll want to take, which you'd know if you've been paying attention and not running this video in the background while doing other things. I put a lot of effort into these videos, you know, so I'd really appreciate it. Hey, are you listening? For starters, you can pretty much ignore anything that only makes you hit harder. Mostly because Era hits like a wet noodle, and your Maelstrom is not dependent on knockback to KO. The Awakenings that are good on Era are those that increase the duration of your buffs and debuffs, which, as explained, are your bread and butter. At the time of recording, the only Awakenings in the game that can do this are Cast the Last and Chrono Boost. On top of this, Cast the Last extends your Maelstrom's range, while Chrono Boost makes your secondary speed boost more potent. So these two should almost always be insta-picks. Your other Awakenings should vary depending on comp, matchup, and playstyle. Learning to adapt your build mid-game is important if you're going to use Era to her full potential. For example, if a team is struggling against enemy brawlers, or you want to buff your own brawlers more, or maybe you're just a sadistic bastard who wants to make sure your enemies don't get to play the game, you can take Rapid Fire and Primetime to have more casts of your primary. Free tech tip, your primary does not count as a projectile, so range increasing Awakenings won't work on it. On the other hand, if you plan to make use of your speed to allow you and your team to run circles around the enemy, you'll want to take the Awakenings that increase your speed boost like Super Surge and Aerials. You can grab Twin Drive as well for double the casts to turn your sprint into a marathon. If you want to throw the entire continent of Africa, or roughly half your mother's waistline, at your opponents, grab Monumentalist and Timeless Creator for a beefed up NATO. As Timeless Creator increases the duration of your Maelstrom, it effectively increases the range. Extra Special can also be a good choice on top of this, so you can spam your Maelstrom like a toddler with ADHD and have more chances at pretending you have a big wrinkle brain even though you completely whiffed the last 4 and scored an own goal with another. Extra Special indeed. For some reason, Maelstrom counts as a projectile, so Missile Propulsion does work on it, though I often find that the extra range is just overkill, since you are spending most of your time midfield anyway. And it's not like you'll need the extra range because you won't be playing her in goal. Right?
I'm in your fucking walls, John.
A couple of honorable mentions are Quick Strike, if you plan to build a lot of speed and blitz the goal, or Glass Cannon, since you can just kneecap and run away from all of your problems, just like how you do in real life by playing this game. As for gear, there are basically only 2 options since you won't be skirmishing much. Speed is key here, so 1-2 buckle your shoes with slick kicks or magnetized soles. In most games, I prefer using mag soles since you'll be spending a lot of time midfield, but take slicks if you need a bit more aggression and core control. If you're still struggling with survivability despite your kit, your best option would be Siphoning Wand, since you won't be doing enough damage to justify Vambrace. Though in most cases this would be way overkill, and you should just learn to not get hit. Forehead.
That was rude.
And that's all for Era. Hopefully you guys found this guide helpful. Personally, I'm tired of all those low-effort guides on this platform that do little more than just read what each of the ability does and call it a day. But until someone who is actually good at the game and can produce a well-thought-out guide comes along, you guys are stuck with me. Alright, let me drop my internet persona for a second and thank you guys for the huge support on the beginner's guide. This video was voted on by you guys in the community poll. And I plan to do more in the future, so keep an eye out if you want to influence who I cover next. Well, anyway, see you guys whenever I decide to awaken from my slumber. Bye bye, my beta cucks! Oh, there seems to be more here in the script. Sam, this is your script editor here. Fix your vocabulary, you illiterate swine. I don't get paid enough for this shit. What the? Shut the fuck up, business major ass! I don't even pay you for the thumbnail. Get back in your cave.